Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasting.
In the early morning hours of Friday, December 8th, 2000, the streets of Dublin, Ireland were rainy, cold, and quiet. 22-year-old Trevor Deely was making his way home after a night out with colleagues at their company Christmas party. Trevor was in a great mood and probably looking forward to a few hours of sleep before heading into his office at the Bank of Ireland. The next morning, however, Trevor's desk sat empty. Knowing it had been a late night for the normally exemplary employee, his boss gave him a pass for not showing up. It wouldn't be until he failed to show up the following Monday that people in Trevor's life would realize that something horrible had happened. Now, over 2 decades later, his family is still actively searching for Trevor, and a mysterious man in black may have the answers that everyone has been looking for. When a person goes missing, there's a special kind of pain in the not knowing. I want to tell you the stories of those who never came home. Today, I want to tell you the story of Trevor Deely. I'm Kona Gallagher.
And I'm Ethan Flick.
And this is And Then They Were Gone. Welcome back, everyone.
Welcome back.
Thank you for joining us once again. This week, we are taking you to Dublin, Ireland, partially because we have a podcast mystery that I need our Irish listeners to help us out with.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
I feel like I might have mentioned this to you. Recently, I found out that we were ranked on the Irish Apple podcast charts as number 19 in all podcasts.
What?
Yeah, and number 5 in true crime.
Whoa.
Yeah.
My mind is blown.
No, I know. And we definitely do not normally live there. And in fact, as we're recording this, I think we're completely back off of the charts altogether.
Ooh, yikes.
But yeah, I have no idea what happened. I don't know if we were mentioned in an article somewhere that made people listen to us, and because it was just so bizarre. So I don't know. We were briefly huge in Ireland.
That is bizarre.
Yeah. So I don't know. So I'm really curious as to what happened a few weeks ago or a week ago, whenever it was to drive that. So I don't know. I think it's also maybe the universe telling me something, because after I was thinking about this, I realized that last month, August of 2023, marks the 20-year anniversary of the last time I was in Ireland, because I was last there in August of 2003.
Interesting.
So I don't know, if you want us to come back, just ask. Just I'll come. If any of you have a nice place to stay, we'll be there. So that got me thinking about Ireland, and we covered the case of Deirdre Jacobs before. Right. She was part of the Vanishing Triangle. And so it made me wonder, what other unsolved missing persons cases are there in Ireland? And I came across this one of Trevor Deely, and it is huge. So he disappeared from Dublin, and everything that I've read said that his family really, really, really was incredibly proactive and has worked so hard for the past 20 plus years to keep his name out there, to try to get information and to make sure people don't forget his story. So I'm very excited to be sharing that today and kind of helping it, get across the pond a little bit, because I'll admit, I had never heard of this. So we're going to bring this to our American listeners and everybody else as well. But before we get started, I want to give a special shout out to our newest member over on Patreon, Lynette M. Thank you so much for your support, Lynette. It really means a lot to us.
Thank you so much.
If you would like to join us over there, you can get these episodes early and ad-free at any level, just whatever you want to do. But now let's get into the story of Trevor Deely. Trevor Deely was born on August 15th, 1978 to Anne and Michael Deely in Naas, County Kildare in Ireland. All right, and I'm going to make a disclaimer right off the bat. I got some shit online this week for mispronouncing a town name in our Claudia Lawrence episode. And it is true because I have a thing where if I'm talking about towns or names or whatever that are already in English, I just assume that I can pronounce them. And it turns out that oftentimes I can't. So where Claudia Lawrence is from in the UK, I pronounced it Hayworth, but it's Hworth.
Okay.
Yeah. And I apologize. If I think that I'm wrong, I'll look it up, but sometimes I just don't think that I'm wrong. And then I find out later that I am, and I don't mean it to be disrespectful. So somebody was very mad at me online this week, and I do apologize. I'm not I'm sorry. I'll be better. But also, I can't do accents at all, as you pointed out to me in Spain, in somewhat of a hurtful way at our restaurants. Because you said something, we were at this restaurant right as we were leaving Spain, and the waiter could barely speak English and I can barely speak Spanish, and we were really trying to communicate. And after we left, you're like, yeah, it's so amazing how you don't even try to do an accent.
Well, you
wow.
don't. Even when I try to speak Spanish, I try to get an accent in there.
It's not that I don't try. I'm just really not good at it.
Yikes.
Anyway.
Sorry.
So my point is I'm trying. I bring this up because Naas, where Trevor Deely is from, is in County Kildare in Ireland. And Naas, I believe, is and I'm probably going to get this backwards because I looked it up. And I think Naas is the Irish way to pronounce it, but Naas is the non-Irish way to pronounce it. So okay. I'm just going to say Naas, and I'm just sorry. Please, I'm sorry. Anyway, so Naas in County Kildare, Ireland. Trevor is the youngest of 4 children. He has an older brother, Mark, and 2 older sisters, Michelle and Pamela. Trevor was described by his family as easygoing, but as a teenager, he didn't really seem to have a particular direction. He wasn't sporty or particular into academics like his siblings. So when he graduated high school, Trevor wasn't really sure what his next move would be. He kind of followed the path that I think he thought he should follow and ended up attending the Waterford Institute of Technology, where he studied business. But after his first year, he realized that was not for him. And then he ended up dropping out. Fortunately, his older siblings were looking out for him. His sister Michelle found him an IT certification course for him to take in Dublin. And he agreed and immediately fell in love with it. She was he took to it like a duck to water. He finally seemed to figure out what worked for him. Trevor did so well at that course that when he completed it in May of 1999, he had 3 job offers.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, right? I wish I had 3 job offers when I graduated college. I did not. He ended up accepting a position with Bank of Ireland Asset Management in Dublin, which was about 45 minutes away from his family's home. So give or take. I don't think he had a car, but you could easily take the train. And I think his dad actually commuted to Dublin for work.
Yeah, 45 minutes isn't terrible.
Yeah, it's better than your commute. So, so his dad commuted, but, Trevor was a young guy. He's 21 when he takes this job. So he ended up being able to get a flat in Dublin, again, thanks to his sister, Michelle. So she had a friend who I guess had an extra room, and he was able to move in there. So he ended up sharing this flat within walking distance to his office.
Nice.
Yeah, with Michelle's friend and another woman. Trevor was well liked at the office and was really good at his job. His manager, Dara Tracy, said of him, quote, "He was a very happy guy. He had this big happy face on him. He was one of these nice guys to be around. He was very positive. He never bitched about other people or gave out about them. He had a very good work ethic. He was very trustworthy. I'm not just saying this because of the situation, but Trevor was a good guy." End quote. Trevor's two closest friends throughout childhood remained close to him as they embarked upon adulthood. Glenn Cullen and Conleth Lunan described Trevor as someone who liked to go out and have some pints, but wasn't a huge party animal. While Trevor was working at the bank, Glenn was working as an international flight attendant for Aer Lingus. As you know, working as a flight attendant comes with perks, including the ability to get discounted plane tickets for his friends and family.
Very nice.
In late November of 2000, Glenn ended up giving Trevor a heavily discounted ticket to Alaska.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, he said it probably cost like 80 euros or something like that. So, I mean...
I want to go to Alaska.
I know, me too. So yeah, it was basically free. And Trevor wanted to travel there to meet up with some girls, one girl in particular, that he had met over the summer while they were visiting Dublin. Now, it seems as though Trevor had either had a thing with one of these girls or wanted to. But either way, he basically emailed them, was like, "Hey, I've got some time off coming up. Like, how about I come to visit?" And, the girl was like, "Well, I'm really busy. Like, whatever. It's not a good time." Because this was late November and she was in college. So
finals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So it probably legitimately was not a good time. But he was like, "Yeah, no, don't worry. Like, I've got the time. I want to come anyway." So he did. So Trevor went and then returned from his trip on December 5th. And even though he flew into Dublin Airport, he caught, I believe, a bus and made the trip back to Nice to see his family. His parents, Anne and Michael, recalled that he was jet-lagged and yawning the entire time he was there, which makes total sense. That's a very long flight. Anne cooked him dinner, and Michael, his dad, had to go off for evening meetings. So he just kind of said hi to his son and, was like, "Hey, tell me about your trip, like when you're in town next weekend." But Anne cooked him dinner, and then Trevor returned to Dublin so that he could go to work the next morning.
Damn, really?
Yeah, he didn't. I'm not saying, 22, not the greatest at planning
he didn't
things.
build a day in there?
In for recovery. No, he did not. So the next day was a Wednesday, and yeah, he went to work. Now, according to Michael, Trevor had initially planned on coming back down to Nice that weekend. So that is what prompted that whole "Hey, I'm on my way out to the meeting. Tell me about your Alaska trip when you come down this weekend." But Trevor apparently told his parents that night that he wasn't going to come down that weekend. But again, he lives 45 minutes away from them, so it's not like a huge deal, right?
They'll see me eventually.
Yeah, and Christmas is coming up. He was going to have time off. Like, it just was, whether he came down that weekend or not a big thing. But his friends say that, at some point between that conversation with his parents and, the next day, I guess, he must have changed his mind because he made plans with them to meet at Fletcher's, which is their hangout in Nice, that Saturday, December 9th.
Okay, so he was going back.
Yeah, so it sounds like he'd been planning on it. Then he kind of said, "No, I'm not going to come down." But then at some other point between Tuesday and Thursday, he told his friends, "Oh, yeah, I'll come down. Let's go meet at Fletcher's on Saturday night."
Okay.
So anyway, so Trevor went back to Dublin that evening, that Tuesday, and went to work on Wednesday, December 6th as normal. Thursday, the 7th, was the office Christmas party, which was to take place at the Hilton Hotel on Charlemont Place. The whole party was going to be there, and it was dinner, drinks, and a band.
Nice.
Yeah. And that hotel was pretty close to the office. This is all right in the city center of Dublin, it sounds like. So before that, it sounds like after work, I think he did go home for a little bit after work, took care of a few things. He actually called his dad. I think he was having problems with the electricity in his apartment, got it figured out, just did a few things. But then before the Christmas party was to start, he met up with a few of his colleagues at Copperface Jack's, which was a nearby bar, basically to pregame.
Can I just say that, I really enjoy the names of all of these places.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They get better. But yeah, Copperface Jacks.
Love it.
I know. So after that, they went to the actual Christmas party at the Hilton, and that went fairly late. It seems like Glenn called Trevor, although Trevor might have called Glenn, but I think it makes more sense for Glenn to have called Trevor, because when he called him around 11 or 11:30, Trevor was still like at the party at the Hilton, and it was so loud. Like, he answered the phone, but they couldn't really talk because, it's the middle of a party. So Glenn's like, hey, don't worry about it. We'll catch up later. At 12:28 a.m., CCTV at a nearby ATM shows Trevor pulling out a small amount of cash, and then he went right back into the party. And the party kept on going for a couple hours after that. After the official party ended, Trevor, along with his manager Dara and a few others, went to Buck Whaley's nightclub.
Love it.
Yes, on Lower Leeson Street, arriving close to 2:30 a.m.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is getting wild.
Yeah, that Christmas party, like, really, it was happening. Now, Trevor stayed out at that nightclub until nearly 3:30 a.m., which is pretty late in general, but super late when you're expected to work the next morning.
Right, yeah.
And you're with, like, your manager.
Your coworkers, yeah.
Your other coworkers. So that night/morning, it was pouring down rain in Dublin. Not only that, there was a taxi strike. So Trevor's only option to get home was to walk. Now, luckily, he's not super far from home, and he always walked from his house to the office. So, like, he was just a dude who walked in the city a lot. So, like, that wouldn't have, bothered him in and of itself. But
except it's raining and very late.
Exactly, right? So, like, that part of it's not great. Buck Whalen's was only, I want to say, like 5 or so minutes away from his office. So he actually decided to go there first.
To the office?
Yeah.
At 3:30 in the morning?
Yeah, it was actually about 3:25 when he arrived there. Now, one of his coworkers, Carl Pender, was actually at the office working the night shift. So I guess they had to do, like, overnight IT stuff.
Oh, yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah. And so he was there, and it wasn't his usual shift, but he was, like, filling in for somebody or whatever. But the point is that somebody was there, and he said that Trevor came in just soaked, like, to the bone, just completely soaked. And, Carl was obviously surprised to see him because he didn't expect anybody to, like, stop in at 3:30 in the morning after the Christmas party. But, he was also probably grateful for, like, a distraction from a boring overnight shift.
Yeah.
So Trevor asked him if he had time for a cup of tea, and Carl's like, yeah, sure. I just have something I need to finish up real quick. And so Trevor's like, all right, cool. And then Trevor went to his desk and logged onto his computer and then did something really quickly as well while Carl was finishing up what he was finishing up. Then the two went to the break room, and, Carl had his tea and Trevor had a cup of coffee. Now, Carl says that he could tell that Trevor had been drinking, but, like, he wasn't falling down drunk or anything like that. He was together, but it was clear that he had been out all night. The two chatted for a bit about the Christmas party and, like, who was there and, all that kind of stuff. But then Carl had to get back to work, so they said their goodbyes. Trevor grabbed a promotional golf umbrella that the company had lying around in the office and left.
And what time was that he left?
So this is close to 4 at this point. Now, Trevor's father, Michael, said that the police checked his work computer, after all of this to see if there were any clues in general, of course, but then also specifically to see, like, what he was doing that evening when he was there. But according to Michael, like, they didn't find anything significant. Like, whatever it was that he was doing that night was boring, basically. Like, he wasn't emailing people, making plans or doing anything, exciting. It was just like, I don't know, maybe he checked his email, maybe he just did whatever, but it wasn't anything that piqued investigators' interests in the least.
So why do you think he made a stop there then? To get the umbrella?
Yeah. I honestly think that's why, because apparently they had several of these promotional umbrellas just like around.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that, yeah, like the office was literally on his way home. It was raining. He's like, oh shit, I can go at least get an umbrella there and then make my way home. I think honestly, that's all it was. And maybe, you know, he wanted to like sober up a little bit, but I mean, since he was walking, it probably really was just to go get an umbrella.
Now, is this around 4 o'clock? Is this the last time anyone saw him?
Well, yeah. So at 4:06 a.m., according to phone records, Trevor called Glenn,
right,
his friend who had called him earlier. Now, Glenn was asleep and his phone was charging downstairs, so he didn't hear it ring. Trevor left a voicemail that Glenn said something to the effect of, quote, "Hi, Glenn, I've missed you there. Just on my way home. All going good. I'll talk to you tomorrow," end quote.
Okay.
Now, Glenn, I say, you know, something to the effect of, because like Glenn listened to the message the next morning and was like, okay, cool, and deleted it because that wasn't something he really felt he needed to save at the time. It didn't seem that important. He just assumed that he would talk to Trevor later that day. But that phone call at 4:06, the reason we know it was 4:06 is because that was the last activity on Trevor's cell phone. A few minutes after this phone call, at 4:14 a.m., Trevor, with his promotional golf umbrella, was captured on CCTV at a Bank of Ireland building on the corner of Bagot Street Bridge and Haddington Road. He then walked out of the range of the camera and was never seen again. The workday began just a few hours later, but there was no Trevor. Now, this was somewhat strange, but not completely unexpected. According to Dara, several people who were at the Christmas party the night before didn't come into work that day, but it was unusual for Trevor. Like, he had that 22-year-old stamina, and, you know, and he had managed to make it in on time after previous late nights out with colleagues.
Carl, the coworker, said that that he could tell he was drinking, but he wasn't like fall down drunk.
Exactly,
so
right?
He'd probably
like,
be tired, but not like super hungover.
Yeah, not to the point where we're going to miss the entire day of work. Like maybe you come in a little bit late.
Yeah.
But like you come in eventually. But regardless, like I said, you know, there were other people who like straight up did not come in that day. So they kind of wrote it off. But then Monday rolled around and there was still no Trevor. Dara and the rest of Trevor's colleagues immediately became worried because it was so out of character for him to not come in general. And, you know, they didn't even have the excuse of like the late night out at the club, right? So they obviously tried calling his cell phone, but there was no answer. After they couldn't reach him, you know, they were kind of talking amongst themselves and saying like, hey, have you heard from him? Like, did you see him this weekend? What's going on? But they realized that nobody in the office had seen him since the party on Thursday night. So then Dara like basically went to HR in a panic and was like, hey, what do we do? Like, we cannot find this guy. He's not in. It's really weird. And so HR went and kind of looked through his file and found his parents' number and called them. And that's basically how the Deelys first found out that their son was missing. I should say, though, when Anne first got the call that Trevor hadn't shown up to work, she didn't realize that he was actually missing.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I'm sure she was concerned, but she didn't immediately jump to the worst conclusion. She called Michael at work and told him about the call, but like that was kind of it at that point. However, after, you know, a little time went by, I think she probably got more worried and was trying to call Trevor herself and couldn't get a hold of him. So she's like, oh, I don't know. This is seeming a little weird. So she called Michael back, who, remember, worked in Dublin.
Right.
I was like, hey, can you go by his, by his apartment and go check on him. And so I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And he did. And I don't know exactly when. He probably honestly waited until he was off of work.
Yeah, because I'm sure he didn't think anything of it.
Yeah. Either way, he went by and he was probably just expecting to find that his son was like sick or, something like that, right? So he went to the flat and rang the doorbell, but nobody answered. Now, Michael didn't have a key to his son's apartment or anything like that, so he couldn't go in. But it was then that he was like, okay, something's not right. Now, I'm pulling a lot of my research on this, on kind of the timeline leading up to the investigation from a fantastic 3-part article written by Rosita Boland for the Irish Times in 2015. Michael told Boland that once he realized his son wasn't at home, quote, "My head began to buzz eventually when it began to dawn on me. Could he be missing? I was getting more and more concerned, thinking, is this going to be our situation? Is Trevor a missing person now?" End quote. And so this is when everyone started to drop everything to look for Trevor. Trevor's brother Mark lived with his pregnant wife on the other side of the country in Castlebar. After his mother called him and told him what was going on with Trevor, he canceled his appointment and drove to his parents' house in Naas with the plan to help search for his missing brother. As he made the drive, Michael and Anne were contacting more people, including Glenn and other friends, in hopes that, somebody would know something about Trevor's whereabouts. No one did, though. So as Mark made his way from Naas to Dublin to begin the physical search, Michael went to the Garda station to report his son missing.
What time was this?
Evening.
On Monday?
Yes,
right?
On Monday.
Okay.
As Mark began his search, he knew part of his brother's timeline on Thursday night just from talking to people. He had found out about the party and, I'm sure Glenn had said yeah, he had called me, blah, blah, blah. So he knew some of what was going on, but not the full thing. So he started at Copper Jack's, which was the first bar that Trevor had visited that evening, in hopes that maybe he had returned after he had stopped by the office. No one had seen him there, though, so after that, Mark basically followed the route back to Trevor's apartment, with part of him expecting to find his brother lying in an alley or a ditch somewhere.
Eek.
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
Yeah, the whole thing was. Mark eventually made his way to the U.S. Embassy and spoke with a security guard. He told Mark that President Bill Clinton was arriving in Dublin the next day, so all trash cans and dumpsters in the area had been emptied.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, right? What a weird coincidence. As part of the security process, in advance of this appearance by the U.S. president, all of the manholes had also been checked and secured. Uh-huh. So this meant that not only was Mark not going to be able to physically find his brother, because if his brother had been lying in an alley or whatever somewhere, he would not be there currently.
Yeah.
But any potential items dropped or clues or anything that had been thrown in the trash or in a dumpster would be gone as well.
That's crazy.
Just the outside factors that contributed to this case. First, you've got the taxi strike.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk more about.
Forced them to walk home.
Yeah. And then it had other implications as well. But, that was the main one, right? And then frickin' President Clinton coming the next day, meaning that they cleaned up everything in the area. So, potentially just accidentally taking any possible clues or evidence. Yeah. Just unbelievable. So that same evening, Monday evening, Trevor's sister Michelle also found out about her missing brother. She was living in London at the time, so she flew out the next morning to help with the search. Their other sister Pamela also came home, and they, along with Michael, his colleagues, and friends of the family and Trevor, all began to search Dublin.
And what are the Garda doing at this point?
So they're starting their investigation. They were, it seems taking it seriously, but it seems that the family was just much more proactive. So the family was really boots on the ground immediately, and it took the Garda a little bit of time to kind of catch up.
Yeah, they might have also been a little busy with
with the president coming in, right? And
yeah.
so that's the other thing that we have. So the whole family, except for Anne, who stayed home and kind of manned the phones, went to Dublin and handed out hundreds of flyers. They hung up laminated missing posters, and they went door to door to homes, pubs, restaurants, like basically talking to as many people as humanly possible in hopes that somebody had seen Trevor or knew something about what had happened to him. Trevor's good friend, who I mentioned earlier, Conleth Lunan, worked for a company that supplied CCTV equipment, so he immediately recognized how important it was to speak to nearby businesses and get whatever footage they may have had.
Uh-huh.
He knew that at that time, footage was stored on VHS tapes that were either kept for a short period of time or, in a lot of cases, recorded over every 24 hours.
Right.
And, keep in mind, they're like 4 days behind basically on this search in general, right? So anything that could have potentially had Trevor captured that was erased after 24 hours, like that's gone, right? So their only hope at this point is like businesses who kept footage for a week or whatever. And that truly was not a lot of them. And on top of that, in 2000, there were just fewer cameras in general than there are today. So it was really a tough situation, and they were racing against time. So he and other friends were actually the ones responsible for securing the CCTV footage from that bank that I mentioned earlier. And when they got there, basically the manager's like, oh yeah, I'm glad you came because we were about to record over this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they wouldn't release the footage to them, but they're like, we'll hold the tape.
Yeah.
And so if the police come and ask for it, like we'll give it to them. And so thankfully they did, and the police did come eventually. But yeah, the police would not have gotten there in time from what it sounds like.
I guess I'm having a little bit of an issue with the timeline.
Okay.
So you said that he lived like 5 minutes from his office?
No, about 15, I think.
Is it 15?
Yeah, so the office was about like 5 minutes or so from the last club he was at.
Okay. Is the bank where he was last seen on CCTV footage close to his apartment?
Yes, it was on the way home from his office to his apartment.
Because you said he left the office around 4 and he was seen at 4:14.
Right. And I did read something that said that like he actually should have made that walk a bit quicker.
Yeah.
But he had been drinking. Apparently, like he was a smoker. And so like maybe he like kind of stopped to light a cigarette or, whatever. But yeah, I mean, it did actually take him a little bit longer from what it sounds like to get to that location than it necessarily should have.
I mean, he's pretty close to his house then.
Yeah.
What about the roommates? Did the police interview them? Did they say anything about like seeing him that night or when the last time was they saw him?
No, I didn't. I never read anything specific about the roommates being interviewed. I am 100% positive that they were, simply because remember that girl in Alaska that he visited in late November?
Yeah.
So eventually, at some point, the police actually went to Alaska to interview her. But not only that, Trevor's sisters flew out to Alaska to talk to her.
So if they're going to go to that extent, then one would assume that they interviewed the roommates.
Yeah. And especially because Michelle was friends with one of the roommates.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Like, 120% they talked to the roommates.
Okay.
So I don't know what the roommate said, but whatever it was, like, wasn't material to the investigation.
It's probably, no, we didn't see him that night.
Yeah, or like we were out, we were gone, we were asleep, whatever. And again, Trevor seemingly did have plans to go back to Nice that weekend, so it wouldn't have even been weird that the roommates didn't see him at all that weekend.
Right.
Because it sounds like he went back to Nice a lot, and, they were his roommates, like not his parents. They didn't track all of his activities. So on Tuesday, December 12th, the day after Trevor was reported missing, authorities brought in divers to search the Grand Canal between Lesson Street Bridge and Bagot Street Bridge. As awful as the thought was, the Deelys knew that the most likely place for something to have happened to Trevor was right there. They watched the divers, bracing for the worst, but nothing was turned up. then, when they got the CCTV footage from the bank, that showed that Trevor had made it across the bridge safely. So the bank was on the other side of the bridge.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So they knew that nothing happened to him as he was crossing that bridge between his office and that bank. Though both investigators and the Deely family are confident that neither Trevor nor any of his belongings ended up in the canal, they are not as confident that there isn't something that hasn't been found in the canal basin. Now, this area is much deeper and more difficult to search. It also can't be drained because draining it would affect the structural integrity of the surrounding buildings.
Oh, wow.
So Trevor's family hasn't ruled out that either Trevor or some of the items he had with him that night could be in the basin, but they don't believe, again, that he went in that night. And that kind of gets us to two of the most popular theories on the case that have been kind of thrown out over the years. And those are that Trevor either accidentally fell into the water or that he decided to take his own life. Now, the Deelys reject both of these for a few reasons. One, Trevor had no known thoughts of suicide, nor was he suffering from depression or displaying any signs of wanting to take his own life at any time, including minutes prior to his disappearance.
Yeah.
Two, Trevor wasn't stumbling drunk or anything like that. By all accounts, he had his wits about him, so it seems unlikely that he would accidentally fall into the water.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, Michelle says that she had just happened to call him a few times over the weekend, and she is almost certain that the phone rang as opposed to going straight to voicemail.
Right.
Now, the way his particular Nokia worked, and this is according to, cell phone experts, if it had gone into the water, it would have immediately stopped working, and it wouldn't have rung at all after that. And, like I said, according to Michelle, the next day, it was ringing. It should also be noted that nothing belonging to Trevor ever turned up anywhere, much less in the water. His coat, shoes, phone, wallet, umbrella, nothing. The Deelys kept up the search but gained little information. They strongly believe that someone out there knows something, but it also makes sense that not a lot of people would have seen Trevor.
Yeah, it's 4 a.m.
Exactly. And as police brought up, they didn't have their normal source of information that they would go to in a case like this. The taxi drivers.
Right.
Because the taxi drivers are out, they're sober.
Yeah.
And they notice things. They notice people. And so when something like this happens, the taxi drivers are the first group of people that the police try to talk to. And they didn't have them. As it would turn out, however, there was at least one other person who seemingly knew something. Now we're skipping ahead to December of 2016. The case went cold in 2000. It went cold for 16 years. But in December 2016, Gardaí began a cold case review of Trevor's disappearance. This involved re-examining evidence and re-interviewing witnesses. As part of re-examining evidence, investigators went to basically the only hard evidence that they had,
which was the CCTV footage.
Exactly. Fortunately, technology had advanced in the intervening years, and they were able to clean up and enhance the old VHS footage. And this opened up a whole new line of inquiry. According to the enhanced footage, which was released to the public in April of 2017, and you can see it on our blog, as Trevor arrives at his office, there's a man waiting there outside.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, this man who is dressed in black had actually, as they reviewed more of the tape, been standing outside of the building for a half an hour before Trevor arrived. Trevor and the man spoke briefly, and then Trevor went inside. Carl, Trevor didn't mention any of this to Carl. So Trevor didn't say like, hey, I ran into like so-and-so outside, or hey, I saw this creepy guy outside and he said something weird to me. Like, he didn't mention this encounter at all.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, whatever that means, who knows? Now, according to the footage, the man stays for a little bit longer and then crosses the road after Trevor goes in.
Out of camera shot.
Right. After Trevor leaves the office around 4 a.m., he is seen once again on that same CCTV camera. But what is also seen is the same man from before following Trevor. Now, despite many public pleas over the years from both police and the Deelys, no one has ever come forward to say that they spoke with Trevor outside of his office that night. And it is important to mention that this kind of gets left out of a lot of stories, but there were actually 2 other people who were kind of seen in the footage as well.
Okay.
And they did come forward.
Oh.
And they're like, oh yeah, no, that was us. Like, and they were his coworkers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So like, yeah, apparently there were 3 people in the footage, kind of at different times. And 2 of them did come forward and be like, yeah, no, that was us. Everything was fine. We were just going home or whatever they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
But this man in black has never come forward.
So even though this guy was waiting around for a half hour, it couldn't have been waiting for Trevor.
Right.
Because like
nobody knew that Trevor was going to go to his office.
Right. So it's a completely unpredictable movement.
Right.
So then it's just a crime of opportunity?
Maybe. But like, also, why was that dude standing out in the rain for half an hour at 4 a.m, 3:30 a.m,
Yeah.
And then like, what did he say to Trevor? And then why did he cross the street like right after Trevor went in?
Right.
It's so strange. And apparently that man was actually seen on the next CCTV at the bank 14 or 19 seconds after Trevor passes by. So like he was definitely following him.
Right. But at this point, it's 2016, so there's no way to go back to find additional footage.
2017, yeah.
But yeah. So, wow.
So 4 months later, in August 2017, a new search was announced in Trevor's case. Gardaí said that they were looking into whether a known criminal was involved in Trevor's disappearance. The suspect is part of a gang that ran drugs and prostitution operations around the Bagot Street area where Trevor was last seen. The police didn't believe that the 2 had a previous relationship, but did believe that he could possibly be the man in black seen in the CCTV footage. A 3-acre site in Chapalazad in South Dublin was cordoned off and searched over multiple days, and investigators confirmed that they were searching for a body. After 6 weeks of searching, police uncovered a gun and over 80,000 euros worth of drugs.
Jesus.
Yeah, but no sign of Trevor. Investigators later said that they didn't believe the gun was connected to his case and that the land was a commonly used stash area for criminals.
Well, clearly.
Yeah, I mean, $80,000 or euros worth of drugs, yeah. December 2020 marked the 20th anniversary of Trevor's disappearance. In an article in the Sunday World marking the event, it's revealed that the 2017 search was a result of a tip that said Trevor had a chance run-in with this unnamed criminal and that the run-in resulted in Trevor being shot dead. However, no further evidence supporting this tip has seemingly been developed. New posters with a €100,000 reward were put up in Irish prisons as part of a new push for information called the Where is Trevor campaign. So nothing makes sense in this case, basically. It doesn't seem as though Trevor was wrapped up in anything weird, drugs or crime or anything, right? Yeah. Where he would have put himself at risk.
Mm-hmm.
He was just a normal 22-year-old working like a boring office job. And again, at a bank, quote unquote, but it was like the bank's asset management division. It wasn't even, they didn't have like a vault full of money in there.
Yeah.
It was just a bunch of computers.
Mm-hmm.
So he didn't seem to be in a high risk group. And a lot of people had said, well, it was kind of a dodgy area where he was walking, which, okay, at the time, I'm sure. And, one of the theories that I've seen online is like, well, maybe he said something wrong to like the man in black or somebody else and ended up getting killed for it. But like,
it seems, that's pretty, like, what the hell could he have said to set that guy off to kill him?
And again, Carl saw him right after whatever this interaction was. And it's not like Trevor was coming in all belligerent and, acting crazy or anything.
Yeah. And he didn't mention anything to Carl about it.
Exactly. And so that doesn't make sense. And then, another theory was like maybe it was a mugging gone wrong or something like that. But,
but then there's no evidence.
Right. No evidence. It's not like he had any money or anything valuable on him. And you don't look at this dude and think like, oh yeah, that's a good target. Like I'm going to get a bunch of cash out of this 22-year-old, like he wasn't wearing expensive like watches or anything like that. Also, if it's a crime of opportunity like that, like if it's a mugging, if it's wrong place, wrong time, he got into the middle of something he shouldn't have gotten into the middle of, like you don't take the body with you,
right,
and hide it.
Yeah, you just leave it.
You just leave it because if there's truly no connection between you and the victim, there's nothing to tie you to it. So as long as you get out of the area, like you're good.
Right.
Right? Like if it was just some random stranger and something happened, you leave. You don't risk taking a body with you. Or even if he wasn't dead at the time, like you don't risk kidnapping somebody.
Right.
Who's 6'1", by the way.
Oh, not small.
Right? He was skinny, like he wasn't, whatever. But like still.
Yeah.
Like you don't just kidnap some 6'1", 22-year-old office kid who is going to be missed. Like this is obviously, like if you're a criminal, you see this like 22-year-old white guy coming toward you, like he has a family, he has friends, he has coworkers. This isn't somebody that you can just make disappear and nobody's going to realize and nobody's going to come looking for him. So like none of that makes sense.
There is the thought that he skipped down and started a new life.
I know there is. But again, there's no evidence leading toward that, right? Like there are no weird financial things. There's never been any potential sight of him. There was never anything kind of like hinting that might be something that he would do. Even with Robert Hoagie Hoagland, he had skipped out on his family 20 years prior. That was at least some indication. But Trevor didn't have any indication like that. There was no indication that he would ever decide to do anything like that. The other thing that I've seen is that potentially, it was a rainy night. It was 4 a.m. You got to think that
maybe
potentially
he got hit by a car.
Exactly. Right.
But it's the same. It's the same thing. Like what? Then what?
Yeah. Then what? Right. Like you're going to be drunk enough to hit somebody with your car, but have the wherewithal to like pick up this 6'1" person, take them with you, dispose of their body somewhere,
right,
and not say anything for 22 years.
Yeah, it seems unlikely.
Right?
Yeah.
So but that's the thing. Nothing seems likely. It does seem that this person who was following him either had something to do with it or knows something or whatever, but it's just...
It doesn't make sense.
Nothing makes sense. December 8th, 2022 marked 22 years since Trevor Deely was last seen, meaning that he has officially been missing for as long as he had been alive before that day. The Deelys accept that Trevor is likely dead, but they refuse to believe any possibility without hard evidence. They also are holding on to the chance that maybe he did walk away, like maybe he did do this voluntarily. They don't think that he did, but again, they have no proof that he didn't. Though Anne and Michael have filled their lives with the love of their other 3 children and their now 9 grandchildren.
Wow.
Yeah. The pain of losing their youngest son is a bottomless hole that will never be filled. Nearly 23 years later, the Deely family is still working to keep Trevor's name in the public's consciousness. They are still appealing for anyone who may know anything, even if it doesn't seem important, to come forward. As Michelle put it back in December 2022, quote, "My parents aren't getting any younger, and they need to know where he is."
It's very difficult. I mean, the whole mystery surrounding his disappearance, and you're wondering about this and wondering about that. And you just can never get away from it, no matter whether I drive down the country or walk out the town of Naas. It's the same thing. There's always something to remind you of Trevor. I would ask anybody with information about Trevor or about his whereabouts to please let us know. So the appeal is to just find my son. I want him back.
Trevor Deely has been missing from Dublin, Ireland since December 8th, 2000. Trevor is a white man with short, reddish-brown hair and a fair complexion. He was around 6'1" with a slim build. He was last seen wearing a mustard and brown checked shirt, beige/gray corduroy flared trousers, dark deck shoes with white stripes, a green padded jacket, and he was carrying a large dark blue umbrella with white ACC bank lettering. Anyone with information on the disappearance of Trevor Deely is asked to contact Pierce Street Garda Station at 01666-9000 or Crime Stoppers at 1-800-250-025. There is a €100,000 reward in this case. You can see all the sources for this episode along with photos and videos at our website, andthentheyweregone.com.
And be sure to follow us on social, and Then They Were Gone Pod on Facebook and at ATTWG Pod on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. If you like what we're doing, please subscribe and consider leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It will help new listeners find us. And the more people that listen, the more chances we have of bringing someone home.
And we'll see you here next week for a brand new episode.
See you next week.
And Then They Were Gone is hosted by Kona Gallagher and Ethan Flick. All research, writing, and editing is done by Kona Gallagher. Theme music is The Stork by Ketza. Additional music is provided by Kai Engel. And Then They Were Gone is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!